You're listening to the Wrigleyville Nation podcast. Season ticket holders and lifelong fans with neighborhood ties discuss Cubs news and neighborhood happenings. Here's your hosts, Jeremy and Pat.
Hello and welcome to the Wrigleyville Nation podcast. This is episode 307 of the podcast. My name is Jeremy Deemer and I'll be your host. I'm joined as always by my co-host. He's my cousin and he's high atop Wrigleyville tonight. How's it going, Pat?
It's going well, Jeremy. Thanks. Beautiful night for a ball game.
It is a uncharacteristically beautiful evening in April. Usually these are tough games to go to. But this stretch coming up this week, incredible weather for April games at Wrigley Field, that's for sure. So we've got a lot to talk about, a lot of Cubs happenings, news, games have been played. We will dig into all of that with our guest this week. You know him from appearances on this podcast, as well as his own podcast. He's the host of the Holy Cow, a Cubs podcast, and he's a contributor over at Cubs Insider. Sean Holland, thanks for taking time out to talk Cubs with us tonight.
Yeah, I'm glad to be back.
And we're glad to have you. We've got some stuff to talk about here. Let's get into the week that was. Last time we podcasted, the Cubs had started the series in Cincinnati. We had a rainout. We had a homestand. The Cubs returned to play the Texas Rangers, where they won 2 out of 3. Some of your initial thoughts on last week, Sean, anything that jumped out to you as we'll start with the positives, things that got you excited this week and with the Cubs on the field?
Well, obviously, I think the first thing we have to talk about is the top of the rotation, Justin Steele and Marcus Stroman, who were outstanding. And, everyone felt pretty good about Justin Steele going into the year, but you still, you got to see it. And it's been pretty good so far. And you can see the formula for the Cubs this year. They're going to win with good starting pitching and defense, and they'll have to scratch together whatever runs they can. But you can see how, if they get the starting pitching they could get, and with this defense, you could see them hanging around this year, which makes you feel good.
Absolutely incredible outings for Marcus Stroman so far, and like you mentioned, Justin Steele. We're big fans of both those guys here on the podcast. Pat, the top of the rotation looking good.
Yeah, so far so good. I've been to both of the Marcus Stroman games. I appreciate his quick work, and the pitch clock seems to work quite well for him, and it's nice to see Justin Steele, as Sean pointed out, doing well. I look at the team now. I mean, we're only 2 weeks in, and they only played 5 games last week, so it's still a very small sample size. But you look at the team and you say to yourself, well, if they can, especially against, and they've done this already, some poor pitching teams or some poor pitchers, the Cubs can take advantage of that when stringing together a bunch of singles and walks and maybe a double or a sac fly here or there. We'll see what happens when they start facing some of the top pitchers in the league. Will the formula be able to work? Will the Cubs add more power or need to add more power? That's kind of been the knock on the lineup going into the season, is that they don't have a lot of power hitting. And we saw it yesterday. They had the 2-run home run, but apart from that, nothing. And so I expect them to be games like Saturday, which for some reason I think fans just find Saturday's game very satisfying, because the Cubs just had a lot of base runners and kind of nickeled and dimed their way into a bunch of runs, and it seemed exciting. People were sliding into home, things like that. But in the long run, will that be, over the course of a season, will that be enough, or will they reach the point where they just can't keep up because of the lack of power? And hopefully, if the pitching stays is the way we're hoping it does, that won't be as big of an issue because at least the games will be close. But that's what's really out there yet to be determined, I think, at this point.
Yeah, Sean, we've got a lot of good appearances there, but some of the, again, the small sample size. Everything we're talking about here is small sample size. But looking at the Cubs offense, we've seen a hot start from Nico Horner as well as Dansby Swanson, of course. But Eric Hosmer, a little bit of a surprise, I'd say, with the way he's been hitting recently.
Yeah, and it's one of those things that, poor Eric Hosmer, that he gets signed to this entry-level contract, and you have the stuff going on, Cubs in recent years have had some players like, a Descalzo or Eric Sogard who have been very unproductive players and get a lot of hate from Cubs fans. And it's almost like it's a hole that has to be filled every year. And poor Eric Hosmer, maybe it's the Mervis thing too, but yeah, he just got the amount of hate somebody on an entry, like a league minimum contract, was getting was just like amazing. And it's almost like it was forcing him to be, you knew he wasn't going to be that bad because of just the negative reaction that you got. And he's been fine, pretty solid. What you'd expect from a guy getting the league minimum.
Pat, what do you think of not only Hosmer but Bellinger? Here's two guys that were both didn't have high expectations for, but have been totally fine so far.
Well, I mean, I think Hosmer, apart from some defensive lapses, is certainly hitting the ball well, which is nice to see. He has a couple more hits tonight. I don't know if Cody Bellinger's really knocking the cover off the ball yet. He's still in the 180s, but it's interesting when you mentioned Hosmer and you also juxtapose that with Nico Horner. We perceive Nico Horner as having a good season, good start to the season, because he's hitting 330 or whatever he's hitting, and yet I think, at least going in today, I think probably still today, when you look at it, Hosmer actually has a higher OPS than Nico Horner does, in part because while Nico is hitting 333, it's a really empty 333, and that's always been the kind of the knock on him, or at least the concern with him from an offensive standpoint, is that even when he's hitting, he's not getting a lot of extra base hits, and he's not walking a ton. So his number, his batting average, sort of, if this were 1988, he's an all-star, but the way we look at numbers today, it's mitigated to a degree by the other factors like on-base percentage and slugging percentage. So yeah, I don't think you can really complain about Hosmer, and I do think the knock on him was unfair. To Sean's point, I mean, the Cubs have signed players for more than they're paying Hosmer right now, who have pitched 2 innings the whole season, or who have basically done nothing, and without any of the criticism or the negativity that he's been getting. I mean, I don't think people were up in arms about John Jay, and and how much did he cost? $7 million. I mean, it is interesting to watch fans fixate on individual players who they either really love or really dislike, and then take it out on them or praise them in unwarranted ways. But if Hosmer can just last like this for a month or two into the season, I think that'll be more than the Cubs could have hoped for, and then hopefully we'll give Matt Mervis time to fix whatever holes he has in his swing in the minors, and then come up and be productive. Knock on wood.
Well, yeah,
and maybe they could even trade Hosmer for somebody. How about that? If they need to, I mean, that's a nice thought.
Yeah, Sean, some of that Hosmer heat had to be coming from the excitement around Mervis and people wanting Mervis to be here and to see him as soon as possible.
It really is, and it's something I feel like I have to remind everyone that, I mean, it's just obvious, but I mean, I get into it too. I get the hype builds up, but you have to remember Matt Mervis has never had a major league at bat. It's not like, no, look, he just had a handful of games. No, he's never been in the major leagues. And when he gets here, there's going to be a ton of pressure. And I hope people don't, if he starts out badly, I hope people don't like immediately call him a bust and just, it's not going to be, it's not like he's going to show up and hit 30 home runs. Believe me, I'd love if he did. But I think people have to be ready for, team will struggle a little bit when he gets here.
Yeah, we should remind everyone to look back on what Anthony Rizzo's first couple of seasons looked like here with the Cubs. So he was not good and bounced back and forth between AAA and the majors throughout that first season with the Cubs.
The progress is not linear necessarily, and obviously Rizzo, when he was with the Padres, he had a cup of coffee and was terrible and got sent down, came to the Cubs. He was in the minors, came up, seemed to do well, and then the next year kind of struggled. He and Castro both, and then got better again. So there are ups and downs. My hope is that poor Matt Mervis does not get criticized or I guess I hope that patience isn't unnecessarily low based on the experience we had with Frank Schwindel, because they are not comparable in any way, really, other than that they're new names. But Schwindel was 29 years old and not much of a prospect. Mervis is 24. Neither one of them were necessarily great fielders, but Schwindel came up, and I think because he did so well those first 2 months after the Cubs traded away all of their star players, built up this interesting sort of fan base of strong supporters. And then the following year, when he came back down to earth, people were just that much more disappointed. Their hopes had gone up higher, so they had farther to fall. And I hope with Mervis, people take a much more steady as she goes. If he comes up and rips the cover off the ball for the first couple weeks, please don't, as happened with Morel and every other young Cub who's ever come up, please don't assume that is his sort of floor from then on, because it's not always like that. You have to look at these things over a long period of time, or a longer period of time. And I think we're so starved in Cubs world for a prospect to come up and succeed, because we've had so little of that over the last 4 or 5 years that maybe we put our hopes too much in players and then get too disappointed in players as well. Yeah.
And even like, if you look at an experience of Christopher Morel, who was just out like the best possible start he could have had last year, the first couple months. And then, adjustments happen. And he wasn't good at the second half of the year. And now he's back in AAA. And I really feel good about him still. And I like to see that he's just crushing AAA. But it's not going to be, there's going to be adjustments, and you're going to get to a slump eventually when you come up like this. It's not everybody can be Chris Bryant.
Right. No, in fact, they can't be. Usually they're Schwarber or Happ or Castro or any number of other guys who come up and struggle, and most of whom get sent back down to the minors. Javi Baez. I mean, think of all the players who were MVP candidates at one point in their career, but at another point prior to that had really struggled at the major league level. And you don't give up on those guys. You try to keep working with them, and they tend to get better.
Mm-hmm.
If they're good, or if they're bad, they don't, and then you don't hear from them again.
And even Chris Bryant has been great, but he gets hurt all the time now, so it's hard.
The Cubs have their set of injuries, of course. We're all waiting on Seiya Suzuki's return to the lineup. David Ross gave an update on that on Monday, saying that best case scenario would have Seiya Suzuki with the team on the upcoming West Coast trip. There's a guy we talked about last week. You put him into right field, the defense gets better. You put him in that batting lineup, everybody shifts into a little bit better of a location, because boy, the top of the order is getting hits, but man, that middle and bottom of the lineup has struggled to get the hits. Putting a Seiya Suzuki there will make a huge difference, right, Sean?
Yes. And I do, the one thing I like about Suzuki too is that he works the count. So if you get him and Ian Happ back to back in the lineup, the way Ian Happ's been working pitchers lately and drawing walks and stuff, that's something that can grind down a pitching staff. And so then you got a longer lineup. You're hoping that Suzuki like takes a step forward this year offensively with a full year in the majors under his belt. But yeah, the idea of lengthening this lineup and getting any kind of power back in it is huge.
I think it'll also be huge to have 3 outfielders on the roster at once, something the Cubs have not had all season. And in fact, they might even have 4 if depending on what they do with Nelson Velasquez, who oddly they called up Velasquez today and sent Assad down.
Correct.
To AAA. That makes sense, right? But why Velasquez wasn't on the roster to begin with? We'd heard that they wanted him to get consistent at bats. So they sent him to AAA. And yet with Suzuki's injury, I can't imagine a time when he could have gotten more consistent at bats than to start this season, because the Cubs didn't have 3 outfielders. They only had 2 at any one time, and they were playing third basemen and utility players and others in right field when, because they have to technically fill out a lineup and put a third person in the outfield every day. I don't quite understand that move. I'm sure they had their reasons, although I will say that Velasquez was doing quite well in AAA, so he started off hot at least, and hopefully that will continue at the major league level. But it would be nice, for example, to be able to give Cody Bellinger a day off in center field and have Velasquez play center for a day. We haven't needed to so far because of all the days off and the rainouts, et cetera. But I would certainly like a lineup that had him on the roster, as well as, I know this is sounding crazy, as well as Suzuki, which I know is 4 outfielders on your entire roster, which seems like a lot compared to the 2 they've been carrying. But maybe you have to give up your 8th catcher in order to do it, because that's how most Major League Baseball teams have structured themselves here for the last 50 or 60 years, and I think it's been a successful model.
Well, I was going to ask, do you guys, the Cubs seem pretty committed to, well, actually, I literally say this as he hits a double, Miles Mastrobuoni, but
his first extra base hit of the year. Yeah.
So with that timing in mind, do you guys think that he merits a roster spot? What do you think about him?
Yeah, for me, I reiterate the same point that Pat just made there. I want to see seeing Nelson Velasquez here is pretty exciting. Having an outfielder there is great, because we've seen him. The Mastrobuoni experience has been pretty underwhelming, pretty fast in right field and at the plate. So I lost interest real fast. I don't know about you, Pat.
Well, look, I think having someone with his skill set, knock on wood, skill set, makes sense for some teams. But I think the Cubs' problem right now is that they've got 2 first basemen in Mancini and Hosmer. They've got 2 third basemen in Wisdom and Rios. They've got 3 catchers, and they already have what I would call a utility infielder in Nick Madrigal, who they're sort of using at third base, but frankly, it's probably more of a second baseman, but they have a shortstop at second base who can play second or short. The need for Mastrobuoni seems less on a team like the Cubs, because if you want to give Swanson a day off, you can always play Nico at short and Madrigal at second, right? So he's almost a redundancy. It's almost like having the third catcher, which is another redundancy they have on this team. And I could see a scenario where they only carry 2 catchers and they don't need the extra middle infielder, because with 2 first basemen and 2 third basemen and 3 middle infielders, they kind of have the infield covered, it seems like, with 7 people.
Well, then the question is, really, if you think about it, they don't need both. So Madrigal or Mastrobuoni, which one do you keep?
Wow.
Well, I'm reluctant to say this publicly, but no, I would keep Madrigal, I guess, right? Because his upside is higher.
Well, and
we
he's
think.
and you have to assume that Madrigal's going to get hurt at some point. He's never not on the IL for long stretches during the season, so he will be hurt, and there will be time for Mastroboni to jump in and fill in at that point in time. But right now, they are redundant players, and they're both not that great to where you need to have both on your roster. Absolutely not. Now, tell us a little bit about what you're hoping to see from Nelson Velasquez, Sean.
Well, I mean, I think he's going to get. I don't think he's going to be every day. I think we can agree on that. But he's got that power that if he can. Someone was saying today, I don't even remember who it was, that you basically have Edwin Rios, Patrick Wisdom, and Velasquez, who are three players that they're going to miss the ball, but when they make contact, it goes a long way. And I think it's good to have one of those guys or two of those guys in the bottom of your lineup all the time. Because, home runs, they're very valuable. So anytime you can hit that. So I wouldn't mind seeing him like a couple times a week starting until, obviously if Suzuki's back in good shape, then you're not going to need to play him that much. But yeah, I'd like to see him get a couple, like a start or two a week if he's up there.
And Pat, sending Assad down makes a ton of sense to get him stretched out for additional starting pitching depth and potentially bringing him up again if you need him in a bullpen.
Yeah, no, it makes sense to me. I think the thing I like about Velasquez is that he can play all three outfield positions. And, Bellinger's a lefty, so it's nice to have somebody who can – and Happ, is a switch hitter. I mean, I could see getting two starts out of Velasquez a week, especially with the DH position available for somebody else. Maybe when Suzuki comes back, they don't want to play him in the outfield every single day. Maybe they want to let him DH for a game and ease into it. There are a lot of opportunities for somebody who can play the field and also bat right-handed on this team.
That is that's it for the other transactions. Anything you wanted to touch on news-wise here, Pat, before we talk about the upcoming games?
I don't think the news. I mean, what's news? The news is what they're doing, I guess, on the field. There's not a lot of other news.
Yeah. No, it's looking ahead. The wacky schedule continues as we spend more time with the Cubs and playing the AL West here at home as they wrapped up the series with Texas, and now they're playing Seattle for 3 games.
I gotta say, going to a game versus Texas and going to one versus Seattle is far preferable for me as a long-time season ticket holder than watching the Reds and Pirates come in. It's just I won't feel that way in a year or two, but for now, I'm all for it. I like the variety. I want to see some of these guys come in who I don't like. It was nice to see Corey Seager and come in last week, and it's or this weekend, and I'm all for it. I mean, if we can bring in some stars from other teams and get a look at them, I am more than amenable to watching that, and I think that goes for most teams' fan bases, right? Like, I mean, I want to see Rodriguez, Julio Rodriguez this week. That'll be fun. He's an exciting player and someone who I would only get to see once every 6 years otherwise. So,
yeah, and then after that, the Cubs go to Oakland for 3 games as well next week. So
now, I wouldn't mind playing Oakland 20 times a year, if only because they're terrible. Oh,
yeah, they're just plowing through the AL and NL West this month. Really, I guess get it out of the way now. I don't know.
Oakland was actually a good baseball team like 3 years ago, weren't they? Less than 3 years ago, maybe. And they are absolutely. I mean, they're going to lose 115 games, I think.
Yeah, it's unbelievable how
Or
bad
more.
that team can get as this season rolls on. Unbelievable.
I mean, yeah, I was gonna say the A's are going like full major league,
Yeah.
trying to move to Vegas and just absolutely tanking.
Yeah.
The Oakland A's are next week, along with this weekend. They go to Los Angeles to play the Dodgers. So between at the Dodgers, you have at Oakland, and then at home for 4 against the Dodgers. So getting the Dodgers out of the way early as well this season. That's a.
I think that'll be good for the Cubs.
I think
because
so,
I
too.
think, the Dodgers have a lot of injuries right now in their pitching staff. So, get them while they're down. That's what I say.
So this week, as we record, the Cubs are currently leading this game against Seattle. Looking ahead at this 3-game series and then 3 at Los Angeles, the Dodgers varietal. For those 6 games, let's start with you, Pat, on the predictions. What do you think looking ahead this week? What's a
for the Seattle Dodgers.
yeah.
Well, the Dodgers on the road, and Urias is pitching one of them. I think the Cubs.
Cubs have Wisniewski going tomorrow.
Yeah. And they're bringing Stroman back on Wednesday.
Stroman and Gilbert on Wednesday.
I'd say the Cubs have a good shot at going 4-2 here in the stretch.
Sean,
given
what
the
do you
fact
think?
that they're leading one of the games already.
Well, obviously this is going to be one that comes down to the wire. It's 2-1 right now. They tie on second, nobody out in the 8th. So, if they can hold on to this game, I feel pretty good about them taking 2 out of 3 against the Mariners. But we will. There we go, Dansby. Okay, now got first one out. Another heads-up play by our favorite shortstop. Sorry, I'm doing commentary in the middle of that.
Yeah, I was going to say this will be really scintillating for the listeners. Come tomorrow.
They'll know what happens.
Yeah.
So I'll be aggressive and say they'll win 2 or 3 against Seattle. Now, LA, I mean, the Dodgers aren't as good as they were the past 10 years, but they're still good. And the Cubs, LA, I mean, that's always a rough for them. So I'm going to say they lose 2 out of 3 in LA. So I'm going with a 3-3 week.
I'm with you, Sean. They always seem to struggle on the West Coast road trips, although finishing in Oakland will help. But yeah, I think 3-3. This team feels like they're 500, and they are going into this game, and we'll see if they continue. I think 3-3 as well. Pat had 4-2.
I feel like we have some real issues here. If I'm going to be the optimist in the room,
You are the optimist, sir.
It's not my skill set here. Now, I guess I should preface all my comments by saying, getting your perspective, Sean and Jeremy, on the Wisniewski performance the other day. The results were not exactly as we had hoped, but overall, what were your thoughts? Because that's kind of one of the linchpins of this, not just this coming week, but of this rotation, moving forward.
I felt pretty good about it because he was hitting 95, 96 on the gun.
I saw that. Was that legit, you think?
I'm not sure. I don't know what
it was reported widely. It felt, that's for him, that's maybe he was just overthrowing. I don't know. I'm not a psychologist. What do I know?
And I don't know what the reputation on Cincinnati for radar guns, but it seemed like the stuff was good, and there were a lot of those bloop singles in that whole series. So I think I feel pretty good, but I'd like to see better results, of course. So we'll see.
Yeah, I think we're going to see a lot more bloop hits with the shift having been eliminated, because you won't have people in the middle of the outfield to catch them. So they will, in fact, turn into hits. But yeah, I think you're right. I think it's obviously just one start, so it's too soon to say. I guess coming off the spring training when he was so electric and so hard to hit, it got people's hopes up that he was going to be Jake Arrieta 2015, which is probably a little bit more than one should hope for.
Mm-hmm.
The whole Sandy Koufax kind of duplicate season is kind of more than you should wish. But yeah, I would like to see him at least be more competitive and last through 6 innings and have a better start, like sort of like Smiley did today. After he got roughed up before, it was nice to see him kind of come back and although he had a couple moments there where I thought things might go south, but he was able to work out of it and got some strikeouts and missed some bats, and so I was definitely happy to see that.
So the Cubs have survived the top of the 8th inning with the lead.
There you go. So the done deal, because our closer. Do we have a closer? Is Fulmer the closer? Is that?
I would think Fulmer, because Boxberger just pitched. So
who do you think will be the closer come August 1st?
I really think if they're competitive, I think they'll trade for somebody. I really do. I don't know who that would be, but
you don't think that Alzolay will step up and take over that role?
I mean, he could.
I kind of thought that'd be cool if he could do that.
That was my preseason prediction, Pat.
Yeah,
but I don't know. They might like Alzolay more as that 2-3 inning guy that he was today. But
if he keeps pitching like he did today and against Cincinnati, holy cow, yeah, he's going to be too valuable.
Here's a compromise. Let's have him be a 2 or 3 inning guy, but he could pitch the last 2 or 3 innings.
Yeah,
do that. They haven't done that in a while.
Yeah, like
Bruce Sutter style. Yeah.
Today's the first night game at Wrigley Field this season, and the new LED lights are being showcased on the television broadcast. We are not there tonight live, but on the television broadcast, holy cow! You can tell it's brighter, and you can tell that it's comes across, looks great on TV.
I feel guilty now. I'm gonna have to go to the living room as soon as I get off this podcast and check them out myself, and I'll report back next week.
It's one of those things too that I don't know how I missed this. That everyone today talk about the new lights, and I'm like, they got new lights? When did this happen? I thought I was tuned in.
Yeah, it was right around World War II, I think, when they got the new lights, and it just took a while to install them.
Yeah,
but they will save money, and hopefully they'll be brighter.
So initial assessment, definitely brighter and better lighting all around with the new LEDs. So thumbs up to that. Cubs so far averaging 32,000 for their home games so far this season. For a team that is hoping to be competitive. Though I think that what do you think of those numbers so far, Sean? 32,000. Now it has been unseasonably warm in Chicago in April, but is this a sign for more Cubs demand this summer?
Well, it's one of those things. I think people are they're expecting results now. They're not just gonna the days where they would sell out Wrigley Field, even in the spring where you'd get 39, 38,000 for these April games. Those days are gone until you have to show out. Now, could it be maybe when they won the World Series, did fans finally go we expect you to be competitive? But yeah,
we did for sure.
Yes, but we'll see. I mean, they didn't raise ticket prices this year. They didn't lower them, but
yeah, they're expensive enough this year, I think.
Yeah.
Concession prices are certainly expensive. I'll tell you that. I think what I'm sort of sensing, and this is based on having only gone to 3 of the first 6 games, so I'm partially responsible for this attendance bump, I guess. But there's a lot of excitement right now from people who just want to go to baseball games and go out and go to a game. And it's hard to explain, but I think it's so easy for us to forget, like, COVID was so long ago, et cetera, et cetera. But last year at this time, we were just kind of getting out of the throes of Omicron when so many people got COVID, and I think there was still, although they were at full capacity, et cetera, there just wasn't as much of a pent up demand. I'm very much sensing pent up demand, both at Cubs games and also in the neighborhood, just in general. People are out a lot, and with this nice weather, even more so. But even before the weather was nice, people were out. Restaurant lines are long. People are walking around doing stuff. I definitely am feeling that, after this is sort of the old school, like this is what would happen in spring after a long winter, and it hasn't felt like this for the last 3 years, but this year is different. So I do think that people are now making plans to go out and go to games, and there's a sort of normalcy that's kind of set over things that has made people more comfortable with the whole concept. So I expect that attendance this year will go up, regardless almost of outcome on the field. Go up from last year. And if the Cubs are doing well or get off to a hot start, don't forget too, they got off to such a miserable start last year. But if they get off to a decent to hot start, I think that'll carry on for quite some time.
Yeah, and these are tickets that were sold at full price, but you get the resale market is still completely bust for the Cubs, so you can.
Oh yeah, don't buy your tickets at full price. I forgot that caveat. Yeah,
exactly.
No.
So the tickets that have already been purchased at full price, buy those from somebody for 10 cents on the dollar. That's the going secondary prices.
As long as you can. Although I have a feeling this week with the warm weather, you're going to actually see people. It's going to get a little bit harder, but the weather here. Well, this is not the end of winter. We'll be back. But yeah, no, that first weekend, we were able to get some tickets on the secondary market for cheap. I noticed on like bleacher tickets last Friday were going for about $25-$30 a piece, which is better than what they would have been had you bought them at the ticket counter. But yeah, I think I don't think we're going to have the bargains that we had starting. I think it was really after the big trade off 2 years ago. The ticket prices plummeted to points I'd never seen, and people still wouldn't go. So
no.
I think those days might be behind us. But you're right, there are still deals to be had.
Yeah, and that's how I will be when I decide to finally be able to get to a game this year. I was debating trying to go tomorrow or Wednesday to try to take advantage of this weather. I'll be keeping an eye on those secondary market prices.
Wednesday's your favorite. It's Wednesday is the a day game.
Oh, I love a good Wednesday
weekday day game.
Day game is my wheelhouse. So yeah, definitely excited for that. So that is it, Pat. Anything else? You told us the neighborhood's buzzing. Anything else going on in the neighborhood we want to touch on here before we wrap it up?
Going around the neighborhood, things look pretty much like they did before. I did go to the small Cheval.
Okay.
And that was good. And actually, I accidentally showed up on Friends and Family Day, so it was all free. Who knew? Lucky me. Lucky the Irish. I was going to point out one sort of fact that I saw on Twitter today that I thought was worth mentioning. And you two can comment on this if you would like. Did you know that in the past 19 seasons in Major League Baseball, there have been 264 complete games thrown?
Wow.
In his 19 seasons in baseball, Fergie Jenkins threw 267 complete games.
Jeez.
That's more than all of baseball has in the last 19 years, just to show you how things have changed.
Yep. Yeah, it's completely different when it comes to pitchers.
I thought that was pretty incredible stat, frankly.
And speaking of Cubs pitchers, Fulmer is in to try to get the save here in the game on Monday night.
I'm definitely with Sean in the sense that I think that if the Cubs, if they don't find an internal solution, and Alzolay is just sort of my sentimental hope, I would like to get an internal solution. I'd like it to be someone who strikes out a lot of batters too. I'm kind of old school on that front. Even though the Cubs have good defense, whenever there's a ball hit late in the game, I always get nervous. I get Brant Brown PTSD, I guess. But in any event, if they don't find an internal solution, you think that they might go externally, huh?
Well, I hate to break it to you, but Fulmer's just giving up a home run.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, so I guess it makes this conversation even a little bit more relevant now. I mean, I guess, we've been in the habit the last couple of years of the Cubs trading off people at the All-Star break. Including closers, pretty much every year. The idea of getting one, I guess the price, varies. But what kind of record would you want to feel like the Cubs have to have, or how competitive would they have to be in order to actually give up minor league talent in order to get a closer for the last couple of months this season?
I would think either in the wild card lead or within a game or two. I mean, if you're not really I want them to be at least conceivably in the playoff race.
Yeah,
to do it.
So you want to get a closer just so that if the Cubs do make the playoffs, it gives them an air of respectability and it's not a complete waste. That they have some fighter's chance of, because as we've seen, if you can make the playoffs, most teams do have a fighter's chance of advancing just because of the nature of the short series now. But you have to have somebody who can close the game out.
And I just think they've got, I don't know if they have to give up that much of they don't have to get the best closer, but some help. They've got enough salary space where they could probably add somebody. So that's something.
Micah Givens and Anthony Bass, a Jason Adam.
Yes.
Or if you want to go really fancy, get a Robertson, depending on how the Phillies are doing. Yeah. I mean, I do think that this is an area, and we discussed this on the podcast last week with Matt Trueblood, where the Cubs, I think from the fans' perspective, because of how successfully the Cubs have been able to manage this one area of the team, which is just throwing out a bunch of guys and having the bullpen work out well.
Mm-hmm.
I think fans have kind of got this expectation now that works no matter what all the time.
Yeah.
And in the back of my mind, I have had some reservations that, I mean, it's gone well for the last couple of years, but there's no guarantee that this is a permanent thing that you can just snap your fingers and pay nothing and get a good bullpen out of it.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess we'll be putting that to the test, won't we?
Yes.
This season.
Yep.
Yeah, definitely. That's tough there. We're tied now, which we've talked about how much we're big fans of the rule changes so far this season. We love the shortened games times. We're enjoying the non-shift and the larger bases. Everything seems totally fine with the rule changes. Sean, were you surprised that now that with the game times where they are now, 2.5 hour average, that they didn't revert the extra inning rules and get rid of the Manfred man starting at second base and actually have regular extra innings again?
I don't know if I'm surprised because they dug in their feet pretty good on that. Last year when it first came out, there was a pretty big outcry against it, and they didn't give in then. So I don't think they're going to give in now. I think they believed in it, and I don't think they're going to back down. And now that the shortened innings thing, the pitch clock and stuff has worked so well, I don't think they're going to back off.
What about the idea of just giving pitchers 5 seconds to throw in extra innings? That way, the extra innings will go really quickly one way or the other.
Could be.
Yeah,
Uh,
I wish we could go. I wish we could get rid. That's the one that I'd like to get rid of. Is the Manfred man
or how about a
starting at second base?
compromise, like in hockey or something? Don't they had this thing where like if maybe in the 10th and 11th innings you would play it normally, and then after 11 you go to the ghost format? I don't know. I know that they want to prevent these 18-inning games. I get that, but why not just let them play the 10th and 11th straight up? Given the fact that the games are also fast anyway now.
Yep.
Well, I will say that there's independent league baseball here. Used to be rookie ball, but got chopped by MLB, so it became independent. The Pioneer League, but they had a minor league rule where you'd have a home run hitting contest. Literally, each team picked one guy, and they'd get 3 swings of batting practice, and whichever guy hit the most home runs, that team won.
I don't think that'll be good for the Cubs unless
Yeah.
I guess they could use Patrick Wisdom, but I don't know.
But it's like a shootout type of thing for baseball. I don't think I like that, but
No.
that is a thing.
All right, and with that, we are going to wrap it up. We're going to call it a podcast. Sean, last question for me before we go. You also have a hockey podcast. We did mention hockey in the shootout here. Will the Hawks be bad enough to have the best chance to get Bedard? And how many times do you go to Tankathon and try to see how many tries it takes to get the Hawks the number 1 pick?
And has Chicago ever had 2 teams finish with the worst record in their respective sports in the same seasons and get the number 1 pick?
That would be incredible.
That I don't know. I don't know the history of that. I will say that it's going to come down to them and the Blue Jackets, and they're tied right now. And the Blue Jackets have the tiebreaker, so they would have the top chance if they tied. But there's still 2 games left, so we'll see. And believe it or not, I have never done the
Tankathon? No? Oh, it's great.
So I don't know, but they're certainly going to have the first or second best chance in the lottery. So we'll see.
Yeah, if you go to tankathon.com, listeners, and it has if you go to the NHL section, you can run the draft based on the draft lottery based on the percentages there and see how many tries. The last time I did it took me 5 tries to get the Hawks the number 1 pick.
I don't think that's a good. That's not a very successful outcome, though, right?
No, it was okay because they were second most of the time, but then like they snuck down to third for one. Third pick would be a disaster in this draft.
I know teams like to tank in baseball because there are residual benefits that you can derive from it. However, the draft pick part is usually the least of the rewards in the sense that it's so hard in baseball. I mean, it's so rare, I guess, if there's one guy who's clearly the best player and deserving. I mean, even the Chris Bryant season, remember, he was the 2nd pick overall. I mean, there's always, somebody always wants a pitcher, I guess. And even Dwight Gooden, was not drafted 1st or 2nd because, of course, Sean Dunston was taken with the Cubs. But baseball seems like one of those sports where getting the first pick, there have been very few seasons when you've been like, wow, the first pick, that's going to make all the difference. Whereas in hockey, we've seen it with Crosby. With basketball, we've seen it in numerous, from Michael, from Patrick Ewing on, we've seen it numerous times. And in football, even we see it with the quarterbacks. And do you get the Manning or do you get the franchise quarterback? But for some reason, it doesn't seem like baseball's had quite the same resonance. And I don't know if it's just because there are too many people involved, although football has more people involved. It's just that are none of the positions in baseball, for example, as important as quarterback and the NBA has so few players and the NHL. Is it just the way the stars are distributed and how that works? What's the rationale for that?
I think a lot of it too is just baseball, especially pitchers. The injury stuff is just such a big looming thing that you can never. You draft a pitcher and they blow out their arm and they're just gone.
It's almost a matter of when they're going to have Tommy John, not if anymore.
Yeah.
It's just much more, harder to develop. It's just, it takes longer, even the best. You don't usually draft someone and they're in the majors the next year. That's very rare.
Sean Holland, thanks again for coming on to talk Cubs with us. Please remind our listeners where they can find your work on the internet.
I am at FTH85 on Twitter. I have my 2 podcasts, Holy Cow, a Cubs podcast, which you can subscribe to on Apple and Spotify and wherever you want to get them. I have my hockey podcast, The Emergency Goalies, with my co-host Michael Ernst, who's also a great minor league Cubs follower.
He's a friend of this show. He'll be on a couple times this season for sure.
Yep. And then I write on Cubs Insider, where I recap almost all the Cubs games. Not tonight. I took it off tonight to be on your lovely podcast, but usually I'm doing the recaps and the previews, and sometimes I will throw out some articles. So.
We did the live feed tonight instead, so you were able to do it in real time.
That's right.
Excellent. And you can follow us, of course, and interact with the show on Twitter and Instagram at WrigleyvilleNat, Facebook.com/WrigleyvilleNation. And, of course, you can subscribe to this podcast on any podcatcher of choice, wherever you get your favorite podcast. Just make sure you support the show by telling your Cub fan friends about the show. Show them how to subscribe to the podcast. Any reviews, stars that you can give us along the way helps us work the algorithm so other Cub fans can find the show. And you can support the show via our Patreon, patreon.com/WrigleyvilleNation. That is where we have been able to be ad-free for the past 5 seasons because of your support. You continue to give us just enough money to where we can pay the bills, we can invest back into the show, and every single penny goes back into producing this show, and we can continue to be ad-free. So thank you for that support, and all of our patrons. And if you want to support the show, that's where you go. And with that, we're going to wrap it up. Thanks again, Sean. Pat, thank you for joining us.
You got me thinking, Jeremy, maybe we should have invested all that money in Apple stock instead of back into the show. But I guess, can't cry over spilt milk. Thank you for having me, Jeremy.
Thanks again, everyone, for listening, and we'll talk to you again next time.